Okay, like I always say, I only have me to use as examples, because I know me best. I've coached a lot of different business owners and businesses, but I know me best. So if I think about, I'll just tell you, the title today is Scaling Smart, Mastering Limitations for Business Success. And if you think about limitations, sometimes we start off with more limitations, but I think for a lot of us, especially with the personality, the ENTJ, the type A personality business owner, we can basically, along the way as we start growing, it's very easy to get cocky. And I will admit, I got cocky. And we started winning awards along the way, somewhere 13 years into business. We started in 1990, and about 2003, we just started winning accolades, awards, achievements, started getting known, started really growing at that point. I told you I have slow growth. I didn't know how to grow fast, nor did I want to grow fast. I stayed no debt for many years, and then I invested in a building when we moved out of the garage, and I was in debt for a little while, but I had goals to become debt-free again, and I did. And today we're debt-free. But anyway, that's a choice. People look at it different ways, and like I said, my friend Ken Goodrich is the ultimate guru of handling debt and building businesses and growing businesses and making debt work for him. But not everybody can do that. Unfortunately, debt affects them and affects their business, and many times debt is the reason why they go out of business. So anyway, by choice, I'm debt-free personally, debt-free business-wise. This has nothing to do with limitations, but it does. I got cocky, and I started getting cocky. People were having me speak different events in hospitals, and we sponsored hospital events in different tons of small groups in places. They'd ask me to come and speak to their business people, and I spoke to many different places, big places. When I say hospitals, I was speaking to doctors on indoor air quality. I got cocky. At one time, I even said, I'm the only one in here that only graduated high school. I'm the only one in here that only graduated high school. And I found that interesting and funny. But anyway, I got cocky. I got cocky with some of the things I said. It was very noticeable. Started winning Better Business Bureau awards, and I would do presentations, and I know some of the things I said were extremely cocky. They were meant to be funny and cocky at the same time. But it was known. Greg McAfee's a little cocky. I didn't mean to be cocky, but if success can go to our head, especially when we're young. I started McAfee when I was 26. So I was still in my 30s when we started really succeeding, per se, and when I started really making money, per se. So I got cocky. And then fast forward many years from there, 2020, I said something very insensitive on my personal Facebook in a very sensitive time in 2020. And the Black Lives Matter thing, all that kind of stuff. I said something very insensitive. I speak my mind most of the time. Actually, 90% of what I said ended up being true. But at the time, it was very insensitive. And that thing went viral. And I got canceled. And I got canceled in a lot of places. I recovered well. The comeback's always greater than the setback. I have that sign on my wall. But didn't know my limitations. You got to know your limitations. And then recently when I lost 100 pounds, after I lost 100 pounds, you might say I got cocky again. I didn't think I needed as much sleep. I was averaging about 3 to 3.5 hours of sleep a night. And one day I passed out and never passed out in my life. But they said lack of sleep and the lack of electrolytes. I was in the hospital for a day and a half. I was in the hospital overnight. I know that. And it affected me. So now I drink a lot of things that boost my electrolytes, and I'm averaging now about 5.5 hours to 6 hours a night. Big difference from 3 to 3.5. So you got to know your limitations. In business, in life, you got to know them. It's very important. We're going to talk about that today as we talk about scaling smart, mastering limitations for business success. Hey, this is Greg McAfee, and welcome to the Greg McAfee Show. Now let's get started. Hey, welcome back to the Greg McAfee Show, where we discuss steps to successful entrepreneurship, how to take your business to new heights, and ultimately follow your dreams. And like I said, the title today is Scaling Smart, Mastering Limitations for Business Success. So, absolutely, understanding limitations is key for small business owners. We get that. But like I said, we can get a little cocky. We can get a little forgetful. We can forget that we started with nothing. And we can never forget that. Honestly, we should never forget that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some examples of some basic limitations. And they can be physical, they can be emotional, they can be intellectual, they can do with time and resources. Understanding your limitations is crucial, like I said earlier, for personal and business success and development. So here are a few reasons why those who don't acknowledge their limitations may face difficulties and even failure. And then I'm going to discuss 3 areas that we need to understand our limitations. And I'm going to give 3 ideas to consider on getting better at this. So the first one over here is overextension. See, we have a tendency to overextend ourselves. It's our business. Most of the time it has our name on it, or our name we came up with, or the name we just recently purchased, whatever it might be. Without a clear understanding of our limits, we may take on more than we can handle. Imagine that, huh? If you're a motivated entrepreneur, you're probably taking on more than you can handle at times. Until you educate yourself or have been educated by reading books, hanging around smart business people, taking good seminars, maybe you've got a master's degree in leadership and business. I don't know. I don't have that. But this overextension can basically lead to burnout. It can lead to decreased quality time at work and quality time at home. And eventually failure to meet commitments will happen. So think about that. Don't overextend yourself. Know your limits. It's okay to be a hard worker. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not a hard worker. It's okay to put in the time. You've got to put in the time. But you've got to know your limits and you've got to have balance. You can balance your time. I said before that many times I gave myself off early. It was put on my schedule. Every Friday I had to be done by 4 o'clock. Friday was family night. We did movies, we did pizza, all that kind of stuff. I tried to be home by 4:30. So I got myself off at 4 o'clock. Every once in a while we'd go till 5, but I'd be home by 4:30 or 5. That gave us plenty of time for pizza and a movie, and we all enjoyed that. And we did that almost every Friday night. And I must say now, looking back, that was probably part of my weight gain problem. But I knew that had to happen. On Saturdays, I worked every single Saturday, half days. Saturdays rock. My closing ratio, and still today, when we run calls on Saturdays for sales, my closing ratio was always 90 to 100%. I told my sales team the other day, if I was a salesperson at McAfee, I would take Monday or Friday off and I would work Saturdays because I would sell more on a Saturday than I would Friday and Monday combined. Saturdays, most of the time when you're dealing with married couples, they're both home, they're relaxed, They don't have to be anywhere. You got their attention and you close. Okay? So you got to know your business. You got to know your days. So Wednesdays, we went to church a lot on Wednesday nights back in the day when churches had church on Wednesday night. And again, I was off on 4 on Wednesday nights and 4 for church and 4 on Friday nights for family. And then Sundays is my day of rest. And unless there's an extreme emergency, we're off on Sundays and always have been from day one. All right, number 2, ineffective learning and growth. Recognizing limitations is the key step to personal development. Those who are unaware of their weaknesses may not seek necessary training or feedback needed for improvement, stopping growth and being less effective. So if you're unaware of your weaknesses, you're not going to try to fix them. That's a fact. When you go through the SWOT analysis and you've got your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and you've got very little, that list is very short on the weaknesses area, you're probably the same way personally. Listen, I know our strengths. I know my strengths. And I work with my strengths, not against them. And I know our weaknesses as a company, and I know my weaknesses. And that list is pretty much the same length as the strengths, because I know our weaknesses and I know my weaknesses. And those without sin cast the first stone. You've got weaknesses. Admit them. That's the only way you're going to improve, is to admit your weaknesses. And then you got opportunities and threats. So normally the threats should be the shorter list. There's only so many threats in a business. And I mean, sometimes you can really stretch it out, but there's only going to be so many. Strength opportunities should be extremely long, but weaknesses is right there, number 3. Okay? I've done a lot of those. I've done it with people running it who are the best of the best at teaching and coaching the SWOT analysis. Those who are unaware, remember that, those who are unaware of weaknesses tend to not fix them because they're not looking for them. You've got to look for them. You can't dwell on them. You've got to look for them and then fix them. And then you've got damaged relationships. People who do not understand their limitations may promise more than they can deliver. I've done that. I've done that personally. I've done that in business. We promise more because I didn't understand my limitations. We used to say yes and then figure it out later. And I realized I was killing my service team because one time during a service meeting that I was in, they said, we don't get to see our kids. We don't get to tuck our kids in at night. That didn't settle with me well, and I fixed that right away. They said, we don't have to be home every night early, but 2 to 3 nights a week would be awesome. And that's what we did. We fixed it. And then you've got lack of adaptability. See, being unaware of one's limitations can result in a lack of adaptability. When challenges arise, we might stick to the same old way, the same old practices, rather than adapting to a new approach. So you've got to adapt. Adapt, overcome, adapt, change, fix it. And then lastly, you got failure to prioritize. You see, individuals unaware of their own limitations might struggle to prioritize their tasks effectively, focusing on wrong areas and neglecting critical issues. This could lead to extreme poor performance. Okay? Your team knows you. They see you. They know their weaknesses as a company, and they know the threats, and they know the strengths. And so they're seeing you fail to prioritize things. And don't think they don't. They don't miss anything. I often say, if you don't know your culture as a company, ask your team. They do. So understanding limitations isn't about focusing on weaknesses, but rather recognizing them and making room for improvement. All right, now, absolutely understanding limitations is the key for small business owners to operate effectively and sustain growth. So here are 3 ideas to consider. You've got the importance of delegation. Delegate to elevate. If you want to go up, you got to learn to delegate. And many small business owners take on too many responsibilities, rather, thinking it saves costs and they can only do it right, and they fear that others won't meet that standard, etc. But when you encourage your team to take on some of your tasks, they absolutely thrive on that. I remember years ago, my receptionist came in and my desk was kind of stacked up. I'll tell you, it wasn't a mess. It just had too many stacks. And she said, "Would it bother you if I organized those stacks?" That's the best question anybody could ask me. I was like, "Take them and go." And she organized them. And my desk became once again clean and organized. All right? So this not only frees up your time for strategic thinking, but empowers your staff. And that's very important. And then you've got focus on core competencies. You've got business owners not recognizing and focusing on their core competencies. And you've got to do that. We can outsource a lot of stuff. I outsource quite a bit of stuff. Not work in the field. I outsource very little of that unless we just don't do it. But this approach ensures that we're using other strengths that we don't have, and securing expert help where needed, which can lead to better quality in products of services across the board. And then lastly on this, set realistic goals. I talk about this often. It's important for small business owners to set achievable and realistic goals. If you're doing $1 million now and I ask you what's your goal for next year and you tell me 3 million, you're either in the hottest climate possible or you're dreaming, pal. Now, if you tell me we're doing $1 million and we want to grow 20 to 30%, 1.2, 1.3 million, buddy, I'm right there with you. We can do this. I'll help get you there. But they got to be realistic and manageable. It's okay to have a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal once in a while, but you can't do that all the time. You're going to let yourself down. You're going to let your team down. So you want to set realistic goals so it doesn't prevent overextension, which I talked about earlier, and it doesn't lead to a path of growth. A lot of companies go under because they set too high of goals and they can't hit them, and their profit margins drop and everything else. So think about that. You don't want to get too discouraged about it either. You want to stay on a high. You want to stay pumped. So these are just 3 ideas that can help us as owners recognize our limitations and strategically plan around them to enhance our business's potential. Short, sweet, to the point, but you've got, on the one side, you've got overextension, ineffective learning and growth, damaged relationships, lack of adaptability, and failure to prioritize. And then you've got 3 ideas to help you delegate to elevate, focus on core competencies, and set realistic goals. So, I think this is good stuff. Just a few good nuggets to take away. We all have problems with limitations. Before we wrap up, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you can also support this podcast by rating and reviewing on iTunes or your preferred listening platform. Keep listening. I'll do my best to keep challenging you. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Greg McAfee Show. No spaces, no underscores. Be sure to tune in next week. Again, got some good stuff coming up. And today was Veterans Day. Just want to say a late to all those who served. Thank you for serving. And thanks for listening. As always, carry on. God bless. Make this day the best day of your life because we're not promised tomorrow. I'll see you next week.